Hello. It's nearly December and I'm just sitting at my desk doing the first sketches for this series of Advent drawings. This is a daily picture challenge that I've been doing every day, every December for the last 13 years. I originally got the idea, the inspiration from Jake Parker's Inktober series, but I was too busy in October, so I did it in December instead. And the nice thing about December is that it's a bit like an Advent calendar. So every day I do a sketch with a different number on, and I kind of thought it could be a nice way to let people get some sort of cheap art. So I thought 24 sketches. I'll make them £24, and including postage anywhere in the world, and just see where it goes. And like I say, 13 years later, they've got a bit more involved and complicated, but I'm still trying to stick to the same ethos. So let's have a look at some of those early drawings and see how things have changed. So the first sketches I did way back in 2011 were fairly safe, I suppose. They were sort of static side view watercolours of cars without drivers. Some of them, most of them were made up, but there are a few there that are actual vehicles. They look a little bit rough when you see them big like this, but actually at postcard size, they kind of look all right. In 2012, I thought I'd be a bit more adventurous and try lots of different styles out. So I did some with pencil, some with multiple vehicles falling through the sky, some with different paper surfaces or different drawing tools like this brush pen on brown paper, some watercolours again, some pencils and ink. So yeah, so they all ended up completely different from each other. So they were quite a very mixed bag. In 2013, I thought I'd go back to the watercolours and just to make them a bit more coherent. But this time I thought I'd just have vehicles in action, so add a bit of movement and speed to them, which I think adds a much more character than just the static vehicles did. So again, most of them made up things, but there are a few real ones there, like the Bluebird. I had a go at doing some of these crashing vehicles as well, which was quite fun. There's an actual car, one of the rocket-powered Opals. The following year, in 2014, I carried on in the same vein with watercolours and vehicles in movement, but I wanted to get a bit looser, just be a bit freer with it. I really like sketches that have got lots of energy because they're loose and sketchy rather than too tight. So that's what I was trying to achieve there. So they were sort of just being a bit freer with it, not trying to sweat over it too much. A few more of those crashing cars. And I was quite pleased with those. I thought there was definitely a few there that I was really thought worked nicely and would help develop my style a bit. In 2015, I thought a nice theme would be to draw all my favourite cars. So again, pencil and watercolour with lots of action. And I've racked my brains to think of all the best vintage cars that I could think of. Things like the Leon Peugeot, there's Mark Walker in Thunderbug, the Rip Special, there's your Morgan-engined four-wheeler with a fabric body. Oldsmobile Pirate, which I think is great. I'd love to see one of those one day. And Duncan and his V8 GN, and Mark again on his Derac. So, and the Beast of Turin, of course, is the Christmas one. And I was so pleased with that series that I decided I'd make a run of prints, so 24 of each design, for those people that didn't manage to get an original, because there were quite a few people that didn't manage to get one. And some of those are still available in my shop at the moment. In 2016, the series continued because it turns out that I've got more than 24 favourite vintage cars. So here's Huey in his Trials car, Clayton Patterson's lovely Model T, Duncan in his Hornet, the twin-engined. There's the Bluebird, the original one, various other things, the Bugatti tank, and the Voisin Laboratoire, amazing thing. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with those. The following year, I stuck with pencil and watercolour, but the theme this time was film and TV cars. I think it's perhaps one of my favourite seasons yet. I really had fun trying to think of vintage versions of the TV and film cars, even though it's quite hard to think of 24 famous film and TV cars, to be honest. So there's Ghostbusters, Batman, the Golden Submarine as the James Bond car, Mr. Bean in an Austin, a Voisin for the Fifth Element car, that kind of thing. Another Voisin for Back to the Future. But I really enjoyed that series. It was a lot of fun. The following year, I was a bit pushed for time, and I thought, well, I could just about squeeze out some profiles, maybe with a brush pen to keep it nice and quick. But I tried to make up for it by creating a nice story for each one. So I invented the backstory, the history of each of these vehicles. And actually, partway through the month, I realised that quite a lot of people were swallowing the stories, and by the comments that they were leaving, I was thinking, oh no, I'm sowing lots of fake news. So but partway through, I had to kind of admit that I was making these stories up and set the record straight. The following year, I returned just to made up stuff, pencil and watercolour, and here's a nice process. So you can see the rough pencil drawing, rough watercolour block in, then a bit more tidying up with the watercolours, and then tidying up the line work at the end there. So it's kind of a back and forth between the pencil and the watercolours. So these are a few from that series. I was definitely much more pleased with how loose these are feeling. Kind of got lots of energy. They feel like they've just been dashed off in a few moments, even though they might have taken me an hour or so. This is one of my favourite of all of them, I think, just because it's just that level of looseness that I was after, and these nice gradients as well in the background. And I quite like the way the cars kind of disappear into the dust, a bit like the Geoham images. He's one of my favourite artists. Here's another process, so you can see the pencil sketches. Sometimes if I'm working on an A4 sheet of watercolour paper, I might work on 4 drawings at once. That way I can sort of let some dry while I'm working on the next, and also if you get 4 done, you're a few days ahead, which helps. So here's the rough watercolour block-in stage after the rough pencils have been done. Then there's a second layer of watercolours just to tidy things up, get some shading in there, a bit more fine detail. And then finally at the end, I go back in with the pencils to tidy everything up and get the line work looking good. In 2021, I was thinking a lot about the London to Brighton run and the types of cars that you got on that, and trying to invent some more vehicles from that kind of era, the sort of the dawn of motoring, I suppose it is, where it's still a bit Victorian, still very closely linked to horseless carriages, that kind of thing, and steam power and all those kind of crazy costumes, and even a bit of steampunk. So there was another quite fun series, just side views. I think I was probably a bit pushed for time. But they made a nice set at the end, and there is a print of that on my shop as well. The year after that, I thought it'd be quite nice to do some rally cars. I haven't really done much in the way of rally cars, and some of my favourite cars are rally cars. So I thought I'll do watercolours, but maybe this time, just to make them look different from the other things, I'll just try and use a monochromatic palette. So just, you can see oranges and yellows, or blues, turquoises and blues. It helped speed things up a bit, because again, some years I'm just busy and it's quite hard to fit them all in. But actually, the end result was quite pleasing, just to see this sheet of sort of rainbow-coloured things. Definitely makes it a bit simpler to get your head around these if you're working in one colour. And it meant I could concentrate a bit more on the vehicles. Some of them were quite modern, which gave me a bit more of a challenge than the vintage ones, which were a bit easier to draw. And finally, last year's series, which again, I was trying to think of what I could do as a theme to link them all. And I just recently bought some toned paper, some grey toned paper, and a couple of chalk pencils and pastels. So I thought, yeah, it would be a good way to improve my chalk skills, because it's not something that I haven't really used very much. And I really enjoyed it. It's using a blending stump to just get some soft gradients and things. And it's quite tricky working at postcard size. It's pretty fiddly. But I was really pleased with the selection of pictures I ended up with. A really nice collection of images that are definitely quite different from what I'd done up to that point. And that brings us up to date. I hope you enjoy the theme I've got planned this year. You'll have to tune in on Facebook and Instagram tomorrow to see what that is. If you're really lucky, you might be able to snap up one of the originals on Etsy. There'll be one every day, and they're limited to one per household so that everybody gets a chance. Otherwise, apart from that, have a fantastic month leading up to Christmas, and I'll see you again soon.